Okay. So the Svarim tell us that the word sukkah is related to the word soche, which means to see. We find in different places in Tanakh that the same letters of sukkah also are used for the word to see. The question is, what are we seeing? What are we looking at? What is the sukkah helping us see? So there's many things written about what we're trying to see, what we're looking at. One of the things that we're seeing is ourselves. Sukkot comes as part of the month of Tishrei, which is a month of looking at ourselves. Rosh Hashanah, Aseret Yimei Tshuva, Yom Kippur. We're looking at ourselves, we're looking at the past year, we're looking at our actions, at how we've grown, how we've fallen, where we're up to, what we're doing, what our past year has been. So we're looking at ourselves. And the question is, how does Sukkot want us to look at ourselves? What are we being called to do? What are we being asked? We just had Rosh Hashanah, Aseret Yimei Tshuva, as we said, Elul already. We were looking at ourselves the whole time. So what's new now? What's the soche? What's the sukkah? What are we looking at specifically or uniquely on Sukkot that's different? What's the avoda that's different on Sukkot of what we're looking at than what we've been doing for the past however many days that we've already been looking at ourselves? So much of Masechah Sukkah, at least the beginning, the first parak, first two prakim maybe, revolves around questions that have to do with what you need to have a kosher sukkah. How tall can it be? What's the minimum height? What's the maximum height? The walls, all these different things. The schach. And one of the main areas that the Gemara is discussing and trying to figure out are halachos that have to do with how much of the space has to be covered. How much airspace can you have? And how much has to be filled in? With walls, with schach, how much of the sukkah needs to be filled in and how much airspace can you have? And I think these two categories of the airspace, the avir, and that which is filled in, that which is parutz, which is breached, and that which is oimed, which is there, it's complete, it's filled in, represent two different aspects of what we're looking at in ourselves. We all have aspects of ourselves, of our lives, that there are gaps. There's open space. There's breaches in the walls. Breaches in our lifestyle, in our system. Something has been breached. Something's open. There's an open space. It's not filled in. There's a void. There's a lack. There's a gap. We have deficiencies. Every one of us, there's deficiencies. That's the open space in the schach, the open space in the sukkah. And then we all have, in addition to that, we all have the filled in spaces. We have the things that we do well, the things that we've accomplished, the things that we're in flow, we're locked in, that we're doing them in the right way. They're filled in, they're complete. And what's so amazing and unique about Sukkot, unlike Hilchos Pesach, where we find that we are always being machmir, the Svarim point this out, that when it comes to Hilchos Pesach, the netiyah, the leaning, what we're looking at is to always be machmir. Okay, I'm not a posek, I'm not saying anything practical, but the leaning in the sugyas is towards chumrah. When it comes to Hilchos Sukkah, we find the exact opposite. When it comes to defining what's a kosher sukkah, when we're talking about how much of a gap can there be, how much airspace, how much of a breach, and how much do you need to be filled in, we're always looking to be makil. We have halachos of lavud. You can have a tiny string, and then you can have up to 3 tfachim of completely open space, and another tiny string, and that'll count for your walls. And even in the schach, there can be halach. It gets a little bit complicated, but there can be halachos of lavud, halachos of dofen akum. There's all these different halachos that have to do with allowing the space that's open to be filled in. That we see that which is breached as if it's not breached. Because I think what we're looking at on Sukkot in a way that's different from all the looking we've been doing until now. Over the course of Elul, Rosh Hashanah maybe is a little bit different because Rosh Hashanah the focus is really more on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Elul, Aseret Yimei Tshuva, Yom Kippur, we're focusing on all of our breaches. all the gaps we have in ourselves, in our lives. And we're looking at all of that, and we have to see it. We have to see the open space. We have to be real about it. We have to create the capacity to look at the areas that there's deficiency, that there's lack, that there's something that isn't the way it should be. That's not complete. It's not filled in. That's until now. And then comes Sukkos, and the uniqueness of Soche, of looking on Sukkos, is that what we're looking at is actually the filled in spaces. It's Zman Simchasenu, it's a time of joy. It's Chag HaAsif, it's a time of harvesting. What are we harvesting? We're harvesting we're gathering up throughout the entire year. Every one of us. We may have a lot of breaches, a lot of gaps. And by the way, even on Sukkos, you can't have your schach be one board, one plank that has no gaps. Because even on Sukkos, we have to remember that there are gaps. We can never forget that we have gaps. You can't just have one plank filled in. But on Sukkos, we're not looking at the empty space. On Sukkos, we're looking at what's filled in. On Sukkos, uniquely so. The life of a Jew is a life that is focused so much on trying to build ourselves, trying to the life of a Jew is a life that is so focused on what's parutz, on the avir, on the open space, the areas that are deficient, the areas that are lacking. But on Sukkos, uniquely, we're actually looking at the spots, the parts that are filled in. What have I done well? What have I done right? Even the things that didn't come fully to fruition. We make a sukkah out of psoles, gorin, v'yekev. The things that we normally discard, the things we normally push aside and don't think there's any significance to them. I started doing Daf Yomi once and it lasted 2.5 days and then I fell out and I tried to catch up and I didn't get anywhere. And I think of that as a loss. I think of that as part of what's missing. I did Shnayim Mikra the first week, and after Simchas Torah last year, I was bracious and I couldn't keep up, and I tried and I didn't get anywhere. And I started trying to be earlier to Minyan or whatever it was, or to be makbid on Lashon Hara more, and whatever I was trying to do, and I didn't get anywhere. And we normally think of that as parutz, as empty space. But comes Sukkos and says, how are you looking at yourself? Until now, you had to look at the breaches. You had to look at the open spaces. You had to try and figure it out, how to work more on yourself. But now on Sukkos, look at even the empty spaces are looked at as being filled in. Look at the areas that are complete and gather up even the psoles, gorin, v'yekev, even the things that you think were nothing, you think didn't amount to anything. Gather them up and bring them into the sukkah. That actually makes the sukkah. That this is the time in the year, this is the time in the calendar that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to look at what we've done well, and to see even what we didn't do perfectly as we've done something well. To gather up our accomplishments for sure, and to gather up even our attempts at accomplishment, even if we didn't fully get there. My Rebbe Rav Moshe Weinberger once told me a story that I don't know how many people here have ever heard of the Chalban. You know who the Chalban is? Yeah, milkman. The Chalban was the milkman. The Chalban was a Yid in Tel Aviv who had a milk factory. He was a clean-shaven, he looked like my Israeli grandfather. For real, I have an Israeli grandfather who lives in Tel Aviv. This is exactly what he looks like. Clean-shaven, he has one of those little hats, and he just, wears khaki pants, I don't know, whatever, and just walk, regular guy. This individual, he passed away not so long ago. He lived as the Chalban. Very few people knew who he was. A few tzaddikim knew who he was, hidden, and eventually, towards the end of his life, he became more well known. He was a huge makubal, a tzaddik nister, and my Rebbe told me that once he was going with his wife to the Chalban, and they walked in, they sat down with him, and he turned to Rebbetzin Weinberger and he said, "What happened to your Tehillim? What happened to your Tehillim? You stopped. Something happened." And I don't know, whatever, the conversation continued. And they left, and Rav Weinberger turned to his wife and he said, What was that? What was he talking about? She said, I don't know, a year ago, a few months ago, I decided to take on a new Seder Tehillim, to try and say Tehillim, but it was like after I finished, with everything I needed to do in the house and the kids and everything, and I was like half asleep and dozing off, and I was barely saying it, and it was nothing. I felt like it wasn't anything significant, and I stopped. But somehow he knew that something was going on with that Tehillim. And he was asked, he knew that there was a Roshem in Shemayim from that Tehillim. From the Tehillim that was half asleep, that was Psolas Goren V'Yekev. She didn't even continue it. She thought this was nothing, it had no significance. Sukkot is to gather, it's the Chag HaAsif, it's to gather the Psolas Goren V'Yekev, the things that we think of as being nothing. And again, this is an important focus, because so much of the year is about how do we grow in something, and how do we grow in another thing, and another thing. And that's needed. Like I said before, the schach can't be one plank. There have to be spaces. We have to see the spaces in our lives. But Sukkot comes and says, we're note lekula. We fill in the gaps. We see it positively. The last Torah in Likutei Moharan from Rabbi Nachman, whose yurtzeit is on Sukkot, is a very interesting thing also about Tehillim. This is the last Torah in the Sefer. It says like this, Me'inyan amiras Tehillim, on the topic of saying Tehillim. Diber im echad. Rabbi Nachman was talking with one of the Hasidim, V'amar lo, and he said to him, She'ikar amiras Tehillim, what is the real way to say Tehillim? Lomar kol mizmorei Tehillim al atzmo, to say Tehillim about yourself. Limtzo es atzmo besoch kol mizmor mizmor, that when you're saying the capital Tehillim, when David HaMelech is talking about himself, whatever he's going through, you're saying that about yourself. It's about your life. Vishalo so zechron al-vracha. So this Talmud asked Rabbi Nachman, Eich, what do I do? What do you mean? Upiresh lo, so explained to him Rabbeinu Zal, Ktsas, he explained to him a little bit. Ki kol ha-milchamos shebikesh David HaMelech alav Hashem, all the battles and the challenges that David HaMelech went through. Sheyatzi leo Hashem yisbarach mehem, that Hashem that David davened, that Hashem should save him. Hakol tzrichim lefaresh la'atzmos. Rabbi Nachman said to this Talmud, you have to learn the Tehillim, read the Tehillim where David's asking for Hashem's help for his milchama as you need help for your milchama. So it goes on, and then Vishal so. So the Talmud then asks, okay, so I understand the milchamos. I understand I have to say the milchamos about myself. But Eich Yufarish La'atzmo Yapsukim Shedavid HaMelech Al Vasham Mishabeach Es Atzmo. What about the psukim where David talks positively about himself? How do I say that about myself? Kigon, for example, Shamra Nafshi Ki Chassid Ani. David talks about himself as a chassid, as a holy, pious individual. So what am I supposed to? How do I read that about myself? So Hey Shivlo, Rabbeinu Zal answered him, Gam Zet Tzrichim Lefarish Al Atzmo. This too you need to say about yourself. Ki Tzrichim Ladonis Atzmo Lekav Schus. Because a person needs to see themselves, they need to judge themselves positively. V'limtzo ba'atzmo eize zechus u'nekuda tova, to see a good point in themselves. That we're not only supposed to focus on the empty spaces in the schach or in the walls. That we need to see that. We need to focus on that. But we actually also need to think about what we've done well. This whole tkufa leading up to Sukkot. I have, from my bar mitzvah, I got a silver menorah and a silver esrog box. I think my school gave me a menorah, and from somebody I got an esrog box, and I still have them, I still use them. And every year comes Hanukkah or comes Sukkot, need to polish them because they get all tarnished. And usually somebody else takes care of it. But this year I forgot to give it, and it was dirty, and I wanted to use it. So I ended up polishing it myself. And I was thinking as I was polishing it, this is what Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Aser Simei Tshuva, Yom Kippur is. It's taking something that became dirty, became dark, it has spots, it's like a greenish, blackish, there's nothing pretty about it. And you have to scrub it. And it actually takes a little bit of work, and especially even the nicer parts are harder because they have more detail. You have to get into the crevices, the ridges of it. It's not so simple. It's not a simple thing doing Elul and Tshuva. But then when you get there and it's polished, and it's completely polished, it's shining. There's something there that's shining. Because underneath everything that accumulated on it, there's something beautiful there. And that's the avodah we've been leading up to, and that's Sukkos. Sukkos is when we've become completely polished. We've been polishing ourselves for 45 days. Polishing and trying to find another spot that we didn't get into yet. And finally we're polished. And now what we're supposed to do in the sukkah, the socha, is to look, the unique looking of how we're supposed to look at ourselves on Sukkos is to see how polished we are. To see once we're polished, how beautiful is this thing that's here? How beautiful is this? That's not the avodah that we always think about. But it's to actually spend a moment and sit in your sukkah and think, what have I done well this year? What have I accomplished? What can I feel good about? What can I feel proud of? What is this beautiful, shining esrog box that I'm now holding? I think it's a really interesting question that I will pause and maybe if we have time later tonight to get back to. I think it's a very profound question to think about the following. Why is it that the message I just gave over is something that for a lot of people will lead to complacency? A lot of people will hear that. I've got this feedback from a lot of people, and I always wonder about it. It's a question I've been wondering about for years. And just this week, I've been thinking about it more, and I think I have a little bit of an answer, which I won't go into now. I'll leave you the question. The feedback I get whenever I talk about something like this is people say, but then I'm not going to work on myself anymore. If I feel good about what I did, I'm not going to feel that I need to grow anymore. Why? Why is that the upshot? If you do something that you accomplish, you make a lot of money, or you eat an amazing meal, you win a game you played, is the feeling afterwards, okay, now I'm done, I don't need any more? Why is it that in the rest of our lives, when we accomplish something or we feel good about something, the natural response to that is to want more of it? But when it comes to Avodas Hashem, when we hear a message to feel good about it, we feel, okay, so now I'm done, I'm good. Why is there that chiluk? That's my question. I've been wondering this for years. I don't know if everybody experiences this, but in my anecdotal research, I think this is how most human beings function. When it comes to the rest of life, if you feel that you've done something well and you accomplished it and you feel amazing about it, you taste a delicious piece of steak, you don't think, oh, I had a piece, so now I'm good. You think, where do I get more of that? How do I get more? I made enough, I was able to buy something or go on a great vacation. The response is, okay, so now I'm good for life. Now I'm done. I got my good vacation. I don't need another one. The response is, how do I get on the next vacation? How do I get a nicer vacation? But when it comes to serving Hashem, when we feel good about it, the natural response is, okay, so now I'm good. Now I have a week off. Now I'm done. Now I don't need to do more.
People can accept and associate themselves better when they have something physical, tangible at stake, at prize, like a board game. When you have a coach powerful, this is not something you see by all the other religions. It's easy to associate yourself with other religions because it's something tangible you can associate with. That's
interesting. So the distinction between the physical and the spiritual, maybe. So this is a question I'll leave out there. Maybe if we have time tonight to come back, I think it actually opens up something very, very fundamental. But leaving the question as a question, the yesod that I wanna just leave us with is this notion of realizing that we all have a tremendous amount to work on. There's nobody that's an exception to that. And that's what we have to focus on a lot of the time. We also have a tremendous amount that we're all doing well. And I don't think we spend enough time thinking about that. We start to take for granted how much we do well. How good we are. Most of us are doing so many mitzvos on a daily basis. The Rosh Kol's father sends out these lists of, when you do this one thing, you got like 26,000 mitzvos, and he counts them all. You know, most of us are doing so many good things, so many mitzvos. And Sukkot is a time to stop and think about that and gather it up to see that the gaps are not the focus right now. It's the filled in spaces. And to see what we look like when we've been polished from over these days. And to realize that every attempt we had at starting a new Seder, a new Avodah, a new thing, has a significance and has a Roshem. And we're gathering up the Psolas Goren V'Yekev to really create this tremendous feeling and experience of Zman Simchaseinu. And that's the socha, the seeing that the sukkah brings us to see in ourselves. And really, it's an avodah for seeing in others also, right? To see that good in others as well. But we have a much easier time seeing that in others when we see that in ourselves first. So Hashem should help us. Hashem should help us to always be able to see the gaps, to work on them, but to make sure that at times we also see what's filled in, to see how beautiful we look when we're polished, and to be able to have a chizuk in a simcha, in knowing how many mitzvahs we do, how connected we are to the Borei Kol Olamim all the time, in all the ways that we're trying. And Hashem should see all our efforts. My Rav Weinberger once told me, when I was telling him about a struggle I was going through, he said, Yaakov, what I hope for is that Achar Meir ve'Esrim, on my tombstone, my goal is it's going to say, he tried. That's it. He tried. We're trying, and we should feel good that we're trying. If you're still in the trying, that's the victory. That's the psolas going to v'yekev that we're gathering up into our simchas. Hashem should help us to be able to see that in ourselves, to see that in each other, and ultimately through all these nekudos tovos that create the ultimate niggin, we can be singing the niggin of all our nekudos tovos with Mashiach and the Beis Hamikdash Mehira V'Meinu. Amen.